Rule the day the plant-based way with the new vegan mixed berry from Smoothie King. Powered by whole, non-GMO fruits, oat milk, and vegan protein, it's a dairy-free, plant-based smoothie you can feel great about. With 13 grams of protein and half your daily fiber, it's an easy way to get the essential nutrients your body craves. Skip the line and order online for pickup or delivery. Smoothie King. Rule the day.
One in 4 women and 1 in 6 men are survivors of sexual abuse or assault. That means you or someone you know has survived an external and internal battle for your soul, which most often no one else will ever see, unless you tell your story. This is Journey On, Survivors Healing from Sexual Abuse and Assault. My name is DJ Burr, and I'm a survivor. I was molested at 16 years old and raped at 18. I didn't know what surviving looked like back then, but I do now. Join me as I talk with survivors and hear their experience, strength, and hope on the road to recovery. Hear our stories and share your own. You are not alone. Thank you for joining me for another exciting episode of Journey On, Survivors Healing from Sexual Abuse and Assault. I'm DJ Burr, and today I am speaking with the author of Denial, Abuse, Addiction, and a Life Derailed, which is based on a true story, and her name is Nanette Kirsch. Nanette, welcome.
Hi, DJ. Thank you for having me.
I am so glad that you're here to share your experience, strength, and hope as an author and as a survivor. So talk to me about Denial.
I would love to. Yes, Denial is a book that I wrote based on a true story. It was inspired by true events of someone who I knew well, who was a survivor of sexual abuse, but in all of the years that we knew him, none of us around him knew that that was his story. And so, unfortunately, that did not become manifest until a number of issues happened, including his suicide in 2009. And when that occurred, he was a millionaire several times over. He was married, had a great family that we were very close with, and was a successful person by any standards that you would measure life. A great guy, very engaged in his community, philanthropic. So it was an incredible shock. And only in the aftermath of that did I begin to learn from his wife, who was also a dear friend of mine, all of the complicated things that were part of his journey, beginning with childhood sexual abuse. And so as I listened and supported her and her family through that pain, she knew that I was a writer. I worked in marketing, and she said, "You should write a book about this." It's such a it was an incredible saga, and I wasn't an author, and so I was hesitant to do that book, and I didn't do it for several years. I didn't start it until more than 5 years after all of this had transpired, which I'm sure we can talk about how all of that came together. But then it was a 3-year journey of really unpacking that story, talking with a wide variety of people who were part of their lives, and really trying to do justice to his story and his suffering in a way that would bring dignity to his life, redeem him for his kids as they got older, and help them just have some context for understanding the suffering that their father had endured. And in the process of doing that, it became really clear to me that there was a great need and opportunity in his story to help other people who were suffering similarly.
What a blessing that is to be able to help this family heal and to help others understand what it means to survive childhood sexual abuse and what the outcomes or the consequences are. Now, your friend, his name is David Wagner, is that correct?
That is the character's name in the book. The book is fictionalized necessarily.
Sure. We'll call him David.
The character is David Wagner. Okay, great.
Yeah. David, how did you meet him? And can you tell us a little bit about your relationship with him and with his wife? Because you said that you guys were friends.
Yes. So David and my husband and I all went to college together, and they were great friends. I knew both of them in college, but wasn't close with either of them. But then we each started dating our future spouses around the same time, and kind of came back together, rediscovered each other, and discovered that great friendship when you're in that early stage of life, that we were all getting married and having our families together and just walking through life together, you know, in that season. And among our group of friends, we had a large group of friends that we did a lot with socially, and David and Mara were sort of the it couple in our group. They were hipper and cooler and funnier and, you know, more successful. And so they were just the life of the party and the people that everybody looked up to and wanted to be around, and a little bit wanted to be like.
Nice. And I'm imagining that they have kids, and do you have kids as well?
Yes, they had 5 children and we had 4 children. I actually have maintained close relationships with all of their kids, but we were sort of stair-stepped. So we were going through, you know, all of the issues of toddlers and parenting and all of that together. So yeah, we did share a great history in that time. And then as is detailed in the book, they moved to different locations. So our lives sort of parted, but we stayed in touch, and obviously came back together more closely after everything happened. One of the elements of that, as I detailed in the book, is that they were going through a lot of hardship as a couple, and a lot of challenges. And as is common for a lot of people in that situation, you tend to become more insular and isolate yourselves. And so there was a period of time where we weren't in particularly close touch, but kind of came back in the aftermath of everything.
Yeah, I want to hear about the aftermath and how and what role you played. I know that you're the author of this book, which is based on his story, but I'm curious what that was like for you to hear the things that happened to David.
Mm-hmm. So it was interesting, I think, for me. First of all, just not having any idea when you count people among your close friends. And I think this was a great lesson for my husband and me in this process, was when you count someone as a close friend, you think you know them, and you think you know their lives and what's happening. And with what inclinations we had of marital strife, I think we assigned a lot of it to Mara, and thought that, you know, she was maybe causing problems just based on what we observed. And at the end of the day, we couldn't have been more wrong about the things we thought we knew. And so one of my life lessons from this was that people are going through all kinds of things that you just have no idea about. And our job is to love and support them however we can, and not ever to think, you know, especially in a marriage, what's happening. In terms of what unfolded in the aftermath, and again, sort of providing part of the incentive to the story, was that the brokenness that began with childhood sexual abuse, which had never been disclosed, and I think that denial really became the catalyst. And I think that's why I was so excited to be on your program, DJ, is I think that abuse is one set of injuries that harms a child, and denial of that abuse and the shame and the pain that comes with it and remains unresolved when we don't bring it into light and talk about it, compounds people's suffering and creates a whole new set of injuries. And that's really what happened in David Wagner's life, is the fact that he never felt safe to tell anyone about what had happened to him, led him into a life that was plagued with addiction to pornography, with solicitation of prostitutes on a very regular basis. The private investigator that actually worked on that case said he had never seen anything like that, that prostitution tends to be pretty opportunistic, that someone might find a prostitute when they're in Las Vegas at a trade show, but this was a regular part of David's week, and so it was part of a larger sexual addiction, a lot of substance abuse, and then within that marriage, all of that just resulting in immense amounts of emotional and psychological pain on both sides. And I really tried to paint a fair picture in the book of two human beings working through that kind of pain and not really knowing. Mara had no idea that David had been abused, or that the things that she was feeling insecure about in the relationship were tied to these kinds of behaviors until really the year before his suicide. And so, yeah, I'll pause there, I guess, just to allow you to ask any clarifying questions.
It sounds like that he was suffering, and then his family started to suffer. And I know what that's like, and I think our listeners know what that's like too. And it's heartbreaking to hear that his addictions took over, especially sex addiction.
It is heartbreaking.
Sex addiction, we talk, the society talks light about sex addiction, but I'm a sex addict. And, as a result of my childhood sexual abuse, I think sex became a part of the template of how I dealt with problems. And so, mine didn't escalate to where David's escalated, but it was similar. It was very similar. And my heart just breaks for the family, because I know what that's like to witness the downfall of someone who's going through addiction, and what it's like to not be in recovery. So, did David ever get to the point where he was exploring recovery?
He did, and I think that was the catalyst that made me just feel this book was so necessary to write. So in July of 2007, Mara had gathered evidence of his solicitation of prostitutes, and she held that information in secret for a year. And they had separated, and she called him into a deposition, and he had no idea what the purpose of the deposition was. And throughout the story, I think there are these moments, and in all of our lives, as survivors, there are these moments where we're given opportunities and called into the light, right? That it's kind of one of those crossroads where you can own what's happened and enter recovery or continue denial. So in this deposition, he was ambushed a little bit. It was kind of going along a nice, easy route of asking about his family and his children. And then the lawyer confronted him with, when's the last time that you solicited a prostitute? And he denied that, and then confronted with increasing evidence, continued to deny it. And that was a real turning point. But after that, in an effort to save his marriage and save himself, I believe, he did agree to enter therapy, and for a 2-week window kept a personal journal where and a lot of those excerpts are included in the book, actually, where he just really began to unpack his pain. He began to revisit the abuse, and it was clear that he was making some crucial connections between that abuse and what he referred to as the disgusting things that I've done. He had so much shame and so much self-contempt for his behavior because he was unable to understand that he was acting out the pain from his childhood. And so, yes, he started to make those connections. When you read the pages of the journal, there's just inevitable hope that recovery is imminent. And there definitely, I think, was some healing and some progress that took place, at least between Mara and David. I don't know that the marriage would have survived it, but there was some new understanding as she was able to gain sympathy for his suffering and understand his effort and his interest in healing. And the unfortunate part is so many pieces had been put in place through his years of denial that the house just started to fall down, and his ability to keep his life together in other areas, his work, his finances and things like that were all spinning out of control. And so sadly, even though those good things were beginning to happen, the consequences of some of the other aspects of it eventually just overwhelmed him.
Wow. Oh my goodness. Such an intense story, and a lot of pain seeping out. And that's what happens when we experience sexual abuse. And I think that's for when we experience childhood sexual abuse, and also when we might experience sexual assault as an adult. So it's heartbreaking for me to hear that so many things were going on for this family, and they were in so much pain to the point where his wife had to, ambush him with a deposition. I mean, that must have been like shocking and caused him to even, tighten his reins around his denial even more because his reality was being threatened. Talk to me about... Oh, go ahead.
No, I was just going to say, I think it is both a point of pain and an opportunity, that when we're confronted with the cost of our abuse and our denial, it was intensely painful on both sides, but I also think it presented an opportunity to move through that pain, that the secrets just don't keep, no matter how hard we try
they don't.
To keep them in, right? They don't.
No, and it causes a lot of pain to keep those in.
I saw that as an opportunity as well.
Right. I think
it's a huge cost to everyone.
Exactly. Yeah. I think all of this is an opportunity for growth. And it sounds like he became willing to explore that, but something happened because he committed suicide. Can you talk about what you think drove him to the suicide, and what information you can impart to our listeners about how holding on to that shame and that pain and guilt and fear can be, so it can be life-ending?
I think that's the powerful piece of David's story, is we hear about the survivors. We rarely hear the voice and the complicated journey of those who don't make it through recovery. And it's hard to know if people are living in denial, as David was. Sometimes they die and we don't even know that that's why. Right. And that's where the piece for his family came in, right? Is he has these children who have now lost their father, who know that he was abused, who have some information about some of his addictions and different memories, because there was a range of ages. And it's a complicated story for all of us, right? That everyone's broken for different things. And so why he didn't make it, in a lot of ways, I think he made it so much further than he probably ever thought possible. When I really stepped into his life and stepped into putting this story together, what became clear to me is that every day is a battle. And every day that he got up and fought his anxiety and fought in his faith, just to plead with the Lord to give him another day. And for love of his children, he adored his kids, and he was a remarkably good and compassionate and wonderful father to them. That all gave him a reason to live. And he did that for so long. And then I think he just got really tired. And the inciting event, the moment that kind of came right before his suicide, was that he was in a contract position with a company and he was let go, and he lost his income. And while he had been a very wealthy person, a lot of that revenue, a lot of that money had been mismanaged and used in the cost of his addictions, and really don't know what happened to it. But losing that and knowing that my marriage is in trouble, I'm financially now devastated, there is no ability to maintain this mask anymore. So if I want to continue, it all comes down today. And I just don't think that he was able or willing to do that. And it seemed like, and again, it's fictionalized because I don't know, right? We don't have the benefit, but just from the interviews that I've done with so many people around this issue and trying to put this story together, it seems like it just becomes overwhelming. The weight of it all becomes overwhelming, and the cost of saying everything you thought I was, I'm not, is a really huge burden to bear for some people.
Wow.
The sad thing is, from the perspective of those who knew and loved him, it wouldn't have changed anything, right? And I think that the encouragement to other survivors who are struggling is that there was a whole group of people waiting to surround him with encouragement and love and support, and he just never had the opportunity to really feel that.
Yeah, for a lot of us, we don't believe that that's true. We don't believe that people will stay We believe that people will
Right.
judge us and ridicule us and shame us. And we already have all of that going on internally, so why invite more? And, you know,
I agree.
I hate to hear when a survivor takes their life. And it just makes me so sad because, you know, I was one of those people who considered that too. And I'm grateful that I didn't follow through, because I get to come and share these stories of hope and renewal to our audience, and provide people resources and kindness and compassion, and help them on their journey on the road of recovery. And I think that's why it's so important to have had you on the show today to share David's journey too, even though it doesn't turn out like some of my other guests. Because you know what? You're here to tell his story, and you're giving us a perspective that most of us won't ever receive. And so I'm grateful that you wrote this book, and I'm really curious, how is that for you to go from this marketing person to an author, and an author of this really intensely personal, dramatic story about your friend?
It has been one of the greatest blessings and one of the greatest trials of my life, and almost equal. I would say that what encourages me and motivates me is the opportunity to be of service initially to that family, and then to hear the stories of people who have started new conversations, or victims of abuse who are opening up as a result of seeing or experiencing this book. A lot of times what I hear is people who read, especially the early portions of it, and make connections in their own lives to a friend or family member who displays some of these behaviors, and it's creating connection. They're reaching out in love and inviting people into a new place. And so that part of it for me is completely worth it. And I try to record the stories. I keep a journal of anyone who has shared a blessing they've received from the book, because that is very motivating. I think just like in a personal confession, as you mentioned, DJ, so many survivors feel guilt and pain and self-loathing to begin with. And the reality is that sometimes when you disclose, you're met with the same thing, right? You're met with people who will shame and blame you and really complicate it. This is a real hotbed issue. And so, you know, there's definitely been opposition too, and people who think that it's wrong to share this story, that it dredges up pain and opens those old wounds. And, you know, that's partially true too, but it's being done in the name of healing and trying to end the silence on this topic. I think yours is such an important voice. I was so excited when I found your podcast, and so proud of what you're doing, because it changes it, right? It shouldn't. The victim didn't do anything wrong in any situation, and it changes the conversation when you can say that. And that's what I'm hoping this will do, is that understand that the cost of not speaking it is great, and the risk is life-threatening, but that the hope in speaking it and finding hope and listening to other survivors' journeys and finding a path for yourself is so worth the battle. And that's really what I hope to accomplish.
And I think you're doing that. I think it's wonderful that you are out promoting this book and getting it out there into our hands and into our lives, because we need to continue to hear these stories. We have to change the narrative. It is not the victim's fault, right? We didn't do anything wrong.
Right. Wrong
was done to us, and we have to endure that. And as we are hearing about David, he did as much as he could, right? And there are a lot of us that can only do as much as we can. And if there are people out there who are in the midst of working through their denial, I encourage you to not do it alone, to ask for help, to seek out therapy. If you feel safe going to like a support group, or even an online support group,
I encourage you to do that, because you're not alone. You don't have to do this alone. This work is hard. I mean, geez, I'm still doing it, right?
Absolutely.
I'm going to be doing it for the rest of my life. And I know our listeners who have suffered as well are continuing to have to do this work. It doesn't stop. But I think it is important to change the narrative. So where can our listeners find Denial?
It is available in any place where fine books are sold. It's on Amazon and Barnes & Noble and so forth. But I also am able to sell the book directly. And so part of my ministry and mission in this is to help change the future for survivors. And so any profits from the book, I am hoping to donate to, I am donating to organizations that support the recovery of adult survivors. Those are being identified. One of the ones I partnered with in the launch of this book is called Brave Step. They're an organization based in Charlotte that provide counseling and resources to survivors. But I'm not limiting that. I think as I continue to expand the reach of the book, there'll be additional organizations that hopefully come on board and that we can help benefit as well, both through sharing the story and sharing the financial benefits of that. And so if you buy the book through my website, which is denialbook.com, and use the promo code Journey On as a listener to this podcast, I'm extending a 15% discount. And then again, those profits will be going to help all of us who are working to have better journeys.
That is so kind of you. Thank you. Listeners, please go to denialbook.com and use promo code Journey On to get 15% off of Denial, Abuse, Addiction, and a Life Derailed. And Nanette's going to be back for part 2 of this interview to talk about her experience, strength, and hope from her own experience as a survivor. And I can't wait to share that interview with you. Hey guys, make sure you come back on Wednesday to download part 2 of my interview with Nanette Kirsch. I can't wait for you to hear her story.
Thank you for joining me for this awe-inspiring episode of Journey On. I invite you to get in touch with me if you want to share your story. You can find me on Facebook and Twitter at DJ Burr 1022 and on Instagram at the DJ Burr. Survivors are also welcome to join our private Facebook group, Journey On Survivors, at www.facebook.com/groups/journeyonsurvivors. And finally, the opinions expressed here are strictly those of the person sharing them. Take what you like and leave the rest. I encourage survivors to share their stories authentically, and I believe every guest on my show has. I value the strength and courage it takes to publicly share our recovery journeys. Please respect yourselves and each other. Till next time, breathe deep and journey on.
Get ready for the tastiest breakfast under the sun. New Jimmy Dean Casserole Bites. All the homemade flavors of a breakfast casserole, packed into a poppable bite.
And you know something else? They taste good.
Regina King for Cadillac Escalade.
Let's say you make it to the top. What's next? Relish in the glory of your accomplishments? Okay, sure, for a minute. But then you move forward. Take the 2021 Escalade. Cadillac's newest arrival is more than just a celebration of iconic luxury. It's the most technologically advanced Escalade ever, because arriving is just the beginning.
The 2021 Cadillac Escalade. Never stop arriving.